My first inclination was to say, let's put some big business objectives behind this innovation capability. I've done tons of work in innovation, and I've seen a lot of times organizations, they'll have these loose objectives and they start to falter, right? And these innovation efforts fizzle out. So
yeah,
my first inclination was like, let's put aggressive kind of quarterly and annual goals behind what we're going to accomplish. But what was interesting for me was when I started to lead my team in the consumer discovery process, right? And we spent, multiple sprints and iterations kind of falling in love with the customer problem. What are the unmet needs? What is their, what do they need from a functional, cultural, and emotional perspective? We really started to kind of hone in on some new territories. And it caused me to take a step back because I said, if we try to pick out of all these different territories, areas that we're going to drive growth in the next 6 months to a year, I would have a very different solution set, and I would kind of put a lot of the good ideas on the cutting room floor. So we pivoted and we said, let's go back and say, like, what are the consumer objectives that we have, right? Like what consumer outcomes are we going to drive? And let's make that our North Star. So that was kind of the objectives, the vision and kind of KPIs we were going to go after.
So Gautam, one of the questions I had to start with was around how you navigate the journey to market, how you bring stakeholders in. Because it's one of the things that we hear the most is that actually the reason that things don't make it is just because people haven't really bought into it as they go through that process. So I guess I'm just curious, how do you think about that in Fidelity? Is it just about making people feel like it's their own idea? What are some of the tools or techniques that you use in order to kind of get some buy-in into the innovation process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think for us, what I kind of learned through scaling up our innovation capability, and now we're using it across multiple product areas. So we started off as a small kind of central group, right? And now it's kind of deployed across different product areas. I think a couple of things, for, again, going back to our customer obsessed culture, the beauty of Fidelity, I think, is when you show up with a consumer insight and that's kind of backed by research or data, like people will take your call, right? I know a lot of companies, and I say this, like, I think they have good intentions in terms of being consumer obsessed, but I think we take it at a different level. And I think the second thing is kind of getting them involved early in the co-creation, right? So you obviously don't want to get them started like right up front, but as you start to uncover some new ideas and territories and you kind of find how this lines up with some of our domain areas or business objectives, then starting to kind of get the leaders early, involved in an early fashion and kind of being involved in the process, co-creating with us. And then I think the beauty again of Fidelity is that we have an agile operating model, right? So the good news there is, we used to be very much functional focused and over the last 3 years, we've kind of moved into this model where we have domains, product areas, and like hundreds of squads, right, which are cross-functional teams. So as a new innovation comes up, you can have those conversations, and it's never a slam dunk, right? You're not going to show up in someone's door and say, that's a great idea for your product area, and they're going to take it, right? There will be good, healthy debate back and forth, but at least lets you have a conversation, and there's an openness to say, maybe we got to reprioritize some of this work. And we actually just did that recently, right? It took a little bit of time, took some iterations, but they were able to reprioritize some of the work and try to get one of these innovations in there. So, it's a matter of getting them involved early in the process, but also I think the fact that we have this agile model gives us that flexibility to kind of adapt and pivot where needed.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so related to that, one of the other questions we had was about culture of innovation. And so I guess I'm curious whether you would describe Fidelity as a particularly innovative place and has an innovative culture. And then if so, how have you got there? Like, because, it's something that we often see a lot of businesses struggle with. So yeah, curious, would you describe it as innovative and how have you got there?
So Fidelity is known for its culture of innovation. And as I worked in the financial services space in my consulting role, right, prior to Fidelity, the number one question I would get asked is like, what is Fidelity doing? Like, how are they so innovative, right? And so now having been a part of Fidelity, I have a personal perspective on the 3 different things that make us very much an innovative culture. The first one I kind of talked about was consumer obsessed. And again, I'll reiterate, like a lot of companies say this, but when you have an idea or a consumer insight, all the way from executives to folks who are kind of working across different product areas, they will take the call and have a conversation because they want to do what's right for the customer and what's best for the customer as well. So that a lot of times wins over other criteria that we have and starts the conversation. I think the second thing that we've done really well is this culture of continuous learning. So when we moved into this agile operating model, one of the things we kind of, as a business, made a decision on was we're going to have a learning day every Tuesday. So think about that. Like every Tuesday is a learning day for the entire organization. And a big part of that is, some of it is structured and programmed, right? Like, we actually in my group, we're spending a couple of months on innovation. Like, let's look outside at what different companies are doing. Let's think about our own innovation process. How can we improve that? So, there's a big menu of things that are available based on your interest. It could be crypto, it could be digital assets, it could be, innovation, it could be, the wealth management business. So people have an opportunity to kind of pick and choose where they want to focus. But I think more than that, more than the specific programming, I think it really creates this curiosity mindset, right, amongst our employees and associates. We're kind of pushing everyone to kind of think differently. And I would say and I personally invest a lot of time on that too. Like I want to spend time with my teams, see what they're learning, working with them and learning with them. And sometimes you rotate things around. Like it doesn't have to be, one of the leaders shows up and like presents something. A lot of time associates go for a conference, and one of my team members went for a fintech conference and she came back and she presented like, all the things I took away from it. And it was fascinating for all of us. So I think this curiosity mindset that we have is a key ingredient in terms of our culture of innovation.
And I guess one of the other questions we have for you is, if you were talking to someone that was in a similar role but in a smaller bank, like looking to set up an innovation capability now, but they don't have the resources of Fidelity, what advice would you have for them? How could they set it up in a lower cost or more nimble or quicker way?
Yeah, I kind of go back to what I've learned in this role, and I agree, like, not everyone's going to have the same resource. And the beauty of my current role is I also actually, outside of Fidelity, mentor a lot of different startups. Some of them are student startups, some of them are, more early stage startups as well. And the couple of things that I can actually tell them even today is, I know you cannot do all the pre-market testing that we do, but can you get more rigor behind and be very thoughtful in terms of getting that consumer feedback early in the process, right? So, do some quick, be nimble in terms of how you do research, but do the research, like talk to like 50, 60, 100 consumers and get that conviction on, is this the right problem that I'm solving? Is this the right kind of solution that's going to resonate with them, right? And I think there's almost like a healthy tension, because when I look at some of these startups, I'm like, wow, I would love to get things, like I would literally, as I mentor different startups, I'll give them feedback, and 3 weeks later, they're like, awesome, we've launched something new in market. Like, you want to take a look at it? And so I'm a little bit envious of that they can get things out the door so quickly. But I'm pulling them back the other way to say, like, have you put enough rigor? Did you talk to enough consumers? Is this the right problem? Like, so I think being disciplined in terms of, like, what are you trying to accomplish in terms of your objectives? Being disciplined on the consumer feedback that you can get, even if it's not a formal research study, but using their network to kind of get that early feedback before they kind of go in and launch experimentation.
So Gautam, when you think about pushing out new products and services at Fidelity, what are some of the biggest challenges that you typically face?
Yeah, I think what I've started to realize, in a big corporation, right, and an innovative corporation like Fidelity, is that we have so many different ideas, right, that we can kind of bring to market. And I think sometimes it's, again, going back to like figuring out which are the, like, I go back to our where to play and how to win, like, which are the territories that we think are going to be, most impactful to consumers, and then obviously from a business perspective as well. And I think there's that level of discipline that you need to have, because I think it's very easy to say, like, yeah, we have a lot of scale, like, let's get 30, 40 ideas out there and innovate. And I think you have to really take a step back and be much more disciplined in that upfront part of the process, to really kind of realize that there's potential here, and we should try to move this part forward. And I think part of that is also to the early conversation we had, right, about like bringing the stakeholders involved. And sometimes everyone's got their own pet ideas, and how do you make sure that kind of fits in with what you're trying to accomplish as well, right? There's always that healthy tension with a group like this, where people have great ideas and getting them in there as well, and seeing how they kind of stack rank. And the good news for us, I think, is that consumer feedback always wins. So we can put a bunch of ideas on a whiteboard and put our own sticky notes in front of them, but end of the day, all of us are like, that's great, that's what we think, but what does the consumer think? And when the consumer research comes in, that always wins for us. So I would go back to discipline. I think discipline is one of the key things, challenges that I think we've started to overcome, but is an ongoing one, where you have such a diverse business and you're trying to accomplish so many different things out there.
When you think about the opportunity now, so kind of going forward, and this could be either in terms of the products or services you guys bring to market, or actually how you sort of shape and change your own innovation capability, what do you see as the opportunity? Like, what are you guys going to be focusing on going forward?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us, and as I've moved from like my innovation role into this consumer strategy and segment marketing kind of lead role, one of the things we've done is we think innovation should be spread across the organization. There shouldn't be, we obviously have several labs and groups within Fidelity that do innovation, and that's super important for us. But what I did with my role is kind of, in the last year and a half or two, is take a lot of that innovation, what we've learned in terms of the process and the approach and the ideas, and now we're trying to scale that across all the different product areas we have within our organization. So it's not just one group that's trying to do it, but you have it kind of embedded across every product area, and they can innovate in the same way we did centrally. And so I think that's been the evolution in a good way for us. Like, how do we scale it? And that was always the idea. It was, let's start and come up with something that's centralized, and then kind of take it to every product area that we have and innovate across the business.
And what happened, because the risk there is obviously that then they all start doing their own thing. So I guess I'm curious, like, how do you keep track of it, or like, how do you make sure that they're all consistent in the way that they're approaching it once you have a decentralized model?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something we're still working through, right? Like, there's always going to be so many different ideas across the business, and there is, like, in a good way, there's synergies across different product areas as well. So we've been organically for now, like, trying to make connect the dots within our own organization to say, like, hey, you're innovating in this space that really, like, intersects with what we're looking at as well. Can we join forces? So, like, to your point, versus having even every product area have their own innovation process, or not own innovation process, but do their own innovation work. We're starting to kind of coalesce around like different strategic objectives we have that overlap across product areas, and then trying to kind of join forces. But that's what, like, more work to be done there, right? Like, there's room, I think, for us to go back and say, how do we do that in a much more structured manner, so that we don't have groups kind of working on similar things, while trying to keep the diversity of thought out there as well.
So, Gautam, at a more personal level in your role at Fidelity, what have been your greatest joys and biggest frustrations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think because I sit with, obviously I have the show within Fidelity, but I also work with a lot of different startups that are out there. I think, I don't know if it's a frustration, but it's one of the things that I want to push us further on, is like, how do we get to market sometimes faster? We have a very rigorous process, which I love, but how do we get things out more quickly? And I think that's why we can continue to learn from, other startups and other organizations that are out there as well. So that's been one aspect of it, and I think that's good. Like, I think we're inspired by some of these startups as well. I think the biggest joy for me is sometimes it's, and we, during the pandemic when we were all remote, we were still doing a lot of ethnographic consumer research on Zoom. Like, we would have these sessions at, from 7 to 10 o'clock at night. And those were some of the joys, like just listening to what consumers are saying and seeing the emotions and the passions behind financial services, right? Which sometimes you're like, oh my God, they're talking about financial services at 9 o'clock, but they're passionate about it, and we could really make a difference in terms of solving their needs. That's been the biggest joy for me. It's kind of learning from consumers and then being able to take that and actually apply it and seeing how it's going to make a difference in their lives. So that's what keeps me going every day in this role and beyond.